As the date for Brexit draws ever closer, it's important for games companies to be aware and prepared for a range of outcomes to ensure that their businesses continue to thrive. For 30 years now, Ukie has supported games companies all over the UK, so we've invited a number of legal specialists to give us their advice on the issues surrounding Brexit that will affect us all. Some of the most successful and well-known original game franchises were created here in the UK. Sally Britton is a partner in Mishcon's intellectual property department. She advises on brand protection strategies, including trademark and design filing.
People talk to me about Brexit all the time, and I think that's because they're keen to ensure that their intellectual property rights are protected in the event of a deal or a no deal Brexit. The government has taken various steps to ensure that rights continue to be protected after we leave the EU. In a no-deal scenario, there will be some more things to consider because there won't be a transition period, but things like copyright, for example, are largely unaffected. In the event of a no-deal Brexit, rights owners need to look at their IP portfolio, their copyright, their designs, their trademarks, and the agreements they have in place in relation to those rights. They need to think about how they'll be affected by a no-deal Brexit. For example, is there a definition of EU in a distribution agreement? What does that mean? What were the intention of the parties? So there's a little bit of homework to do, but the government has put in place measures to protect the rights that exist at the moment. When it comes to trademarks and designs, they are some of the rights which are most affected by Brexit. At the moment, we have two regimes in the UK. We have an EU-wide regime that gives you a right. You file one application and you get a registration across the EU, or you can file directly in the UK. Understandably, many businesses in a number of sectors have focused on the EU-wide rights. The government has confirmed that those EU-wide rights will be cloned into new registrations in the UK, so there is nothing that businesses need to do at the moment, although we do recommend that they review the rights and consider what next steps they need to take. If you're looking to file new trademark applications, you don't necessarily need to file in the UK and the EU because there will be a 9-month window after we leave the EU for you to file claiming protection from the date you filed. So there is no reason for you to file in the UK specifically at the moment. If there is a no deal, copyright protection will be largely unchanged because it depends on a variety of international treaties which you'll still be a party to. However, businesses need to think about things that will change in relation to cross-border protection and other developments like, for example, the controversial copyright directive, which member states need to implement by June 2021. And the UK government will need to think about how they are going to implement it. Are they going to align or not? And that would be something for businesses to think about, whether they lobby for that or whether they leave it alone. At the moment, rights owners can rely on the EU-wide application for action procedure in relation to counterfeit goods. When we leave the EU, if the application has been filed in the EU, rights owners will need to file a second application in the UK. If they've filed in the UK, they'll need to file a second application in the EU. Unregistered design protection has been a really hot topic during discussions on Brexit for IP owners. At the moment, there is an EU-wide protection that arises automatically on creation and disclosure of a right in the UK or anywhere in the EU. Put simply, if you disclose those rights in the UK post leaving the EU, those rights may not exist. So rights owners need to think about more registrations and also about where they disclose their designs. For example, disclosure on live streaming, Instagram is being considered by many. So there's a number of things to think about in the event of a no-deal Brexit. However, to boil it down to a few key things, have a look at your trademark and design portfolio, where you've got rights registered and whether you need to accommodate the new rights that are being created or whether you need to make new filings. Look at your copyright position and think about the changes that are going to come along in terms of cross-border enforcement and also the new copyright directive. And also, finally, think about unregistered design protection. Think about the fact that those rights may not exist post-Brexit. Think about where you're disclosing the designs. Maybe online disclosure may be the most appropriate route to take.
Part of what makes the UK such a great place to develop and sell games are the fantastic opportunities for funding. Tim Davis is from Sheridan's. He's an associate in the firm's Computer Games and Digital Media Group and is a specialist in corporate finance.
We're getting a lot of questions from game developers about what's going to happen after Brexit. As far as existing funding goes, all developers should be checking what's in their contract. Is there anything that would allow a publisher, funder, financier, investor to get out of paying you any money that they've committed to? So check what you have in writing with that particular person to make sure that you still have the money to make your game. The European Commission has recertified the video games tax credit scheme until 2023. So in the short term, it should be staying where it is. A similar thing happening with R&D as well. Obviously that's treated as a state aid, but there's no plans for them to change in the near future. If you want to take an optimistic view about what might happen after Brexit, technically the UK won't be bound by the EU state aid rules. They're rules that limit the amount of funding that UK companies can get from schemes such as video game tax relief and R&D. Investor-friendly tax relief schemes, including the Enterprise Investment Scheme, EIS, or Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, SEIS. There's no indication from the UK government that these will disappear, but that's probably something to keep an eye on. It's entirely possible that the UK government, if it decides to stick with these schemes, they'll improve them and make them even more beneficial for UK companies or investors. But of course, that's not guaranteed, and in any event, it probably won't happen until the current certification runs out in 2023. Perhaps one of the biggest impacts is going to relate to funding that the UK gets from the EU, specifically funding that's coming from Creative Europe. That funding is going to disappear, but the UK government has at least initially committed to underwriting any funds that developers or companies might have had from Creative Europe. So if that means you and you do have that funding, then that's probably something you should be looking at immediately. Will publishers stop funding games made in the UK post-Brexit? If anything, a weak pound probably means that actually the UK is going to be even better value in terms of developing those games. One of the impacts you might see though is that developers might start looking at countries such as France, which has been quite aggressive in terms of putting in place a new tax credit incentive scheme. So in summary, video games tax relief and the other creative reliefs aren't set to disappear and they should remain in place until 2023. Research and development R&D relief should stay in place, as well as investor-friendly tax schemes such as EIS and SEIS. If you have Creative Europe funding or any other sources of funding from European institutions, you should be checking your contracts to make sure that that funding is still valid. Similarly, if you've got any sort of publishing agreement or any kind of agreement where you're getting money from any other company overseas, definitely just check that there's nothing in writing that allows that other party to get out of your contract post-Brexit.
Tapping into the very best talent is important for us to ensure we keep making games with global appeal. Kelvin is from Charles Russell Speech Leads and he specialises in corporate immigration with clients ranging from multinational companies through to SMEs and startups.
When we talk to our clients in the games industry, one of their biggest concerns is accessing the most highly skilled talent and how they'll continue to access talent post-Brexit. If the UK does leave the EU on the 31st of October, then free movement in its current form would come to an end. However, the government have confirmed in their No Deal policy paper that European nationals will still be able to enter the UK without needing to obtain a visa between the 31st of October and the 31st of December 2020. They've confirmed they'll be able to enter and work, live and study in the UK. And if they wish to remain beyond that, they will be able to apply for European temporary leave, which will be issued for a period of 36 months. They'll then be able to switch from European temporary leave to leave to remain in one of the UK's new immigration categories, provided they can meet those requirements. The post-Brexit immigration system would be one that provides no specific favourable treatment to European nationals over non-European nationals. One thing for Irish citizens to bear in mind is they may well be residing here with European national family members or even non-European family members on the basis that they were exercising treaty rights. Those family members should still apply under the settled status scheme, even though the Irish citizen themselves doesn't need to apply. One of the challenges at the moment is the minimum salary level. The Migration Advisory Committee recommended that they keep minimum salary levels the same. That would mean the minimum salary to be able to bring a migrant worker into the UK is £30,000 per year. That's not necessarily a problem for companies for the most highly skilled roles, but many of the Europeans that companies currently employ would be earning salaries below that. We recommend that companies assess exactly what roles are currently being filled at that level by European nationals, look at their salary levels currently being paid. Alternatively, start to look at whether you can begin to try and train local workers to be able to fill those vacancies. For employees planning for the potential of a no deal Brexit on the 31st of October, there are a few things that they should all be doing now. One thing they should be considering is communication. It's obviously a time of great uncertainty for European employees that are currently based in the UK and for those that are here with their family. It's important that employers are messaging regularly to employees so that it's clear that they have a good understanding of what's happening with Brexit. It's also relevant for any prospective new hires. Given how close we are to a no deal Brexit, they may be getting cold feet, and I think it's important to communicate with them, reassuring them that you'll be willing to support them through that new system, hopefully to the point that they can qualify for indefinite leave to remain. The other thing that employers should be doing right now is talking to their employees about the EU settlement scheme. Although people have until the 31st of December 2020 in the event of a no deal to apply, we're seeing a lot of people applying right now, and this effectively gives them that reassurance that although we're facing a no deal Brexit, they have done something to have their status and position recognised. Another consideration is looking at any new hires due to start. So you may want to consider bringing forward their start date to before the 31st of October, simply to ensure that they will benefit from the settled status scheme and be on track to qualify for settled status after 5 years. One thing to flag that's actually beneficial for computer game companies at the moment is the government have recently announced that they will be expanding the list of shortage occupation roles. Any company wishing to benefit from those roles will need to have their sponsor license registered as being a recognised digital technology company. So it is a time of great change in immigration with Brexit, with updates to the immigration rules, a potential new immigration system, and these updates to the shortage occupation list. There's a lot going on. The government website does have up-to-date information, but if you're struggling to find the right information on the government websites, please always feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to assist you.
As an inherently digital industry, access to data is vital for games companies. ATAN is part of Sheridan's Digital Media Group and has a comprehensive knowledge of regulation relating to data privacy and protection.
All games companies will be using data for something. We try to help them with the way they move that around between nation states and in and out of the EEA. Brexit will have an impact. It's not a massive deal, I don't think, for the way data will be transferred, but there's definitely some work to be done. The way GDPR deals with data protection is it assumes that if the data is staying in the EEA, it's going to be held to a high standard. If the UK leaves the EU, then it means we're now outside of the EEA. In spite of having almost identical rules, we don't have that formal recognition that we are a safe place to send your data. So we would need to put in some other measure to allow that data to be sent lawfully. The standard clauses are one means of taking data outside of the EEA lawfully under GDPR. And what it is a contract between the business or the company which holds data in the EEA and another company outside the EEA. It's a standard form contract, it shouldn't really be negotiated. It has a table in the back that needs to be filled in, which explains some of the ins and outs of what's going to be happening. And then once that document's been entered, the recipient is then obligated under this contract to treat it to a GDPR grade standard. GDPR is enforced in the EEA by each member state. They all have their own supervisory authority. And if you get in trouble for your GDPR work and the regulator wants to approach you, they are able to coordinate through a single supervisory authority, so you only have to deal with one in one member state, and that's called the one-stop shop. With Brexit, it means that if you're a UK business and you suffer enforcement action, if you are just in the UK, you would only have to deal with the ICO, which is our national regulator. If you are operating across Europe, you would end up dealing with the ICO for the UK offence, and then one of the other regulators who would then represent all the other member states in which the action took place. If you're based entirely outside of the EEA, then you're also expected to appoint a representative there, and that's just so that the regulators can enforce against someone that is within the scope of their jurisdiction. That could be anyone. It could be a company, it could be a service provider, a third-party advisor, it could even be one of your own team. The main thing is that they're geographically located in the EEA. Otherwise, you will be able to find these people online, and the regulator in the UK, the ICO, has some guidance on that. The key things for you to take away from this are that you should consider whether you need to enter the standard clauses, and separately, consider whether you need to appoint a representative within the EEA. If you'd like to find out more, you can go to the ICO website, which is ico.org.uk, and you'll find good resources there on data transfers post-Brexit.
We hope you found this useful. For more information, go to our website, ukie.org.uk.